Okay.
And we are recording. So whenever you're ready, Commissioner Meza.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing very well. I'm calling this meeting to order at 9:34. My name is Ben Meza. I am chair of the City of San Diego Commission for Arts and Culture Public Art Committee. We're going to do a quick roll call to confirm committee member attendance. When I call your name, please unmute yourself and say present. Commissioner Jason Wooper.
Present.
Linda Caballero Sotelo.
Present.
Anthony Graham. Melinda Guillen.
Present.
Larry Herzog.
Present.
Unyoung Park.
Present.
Commissioner Doreen Schornburn. Tiffany Wei-Ying Bears.
Present.
Thank you. Your attendance has been noted. Also joining us today is Commissioner for Arts and Culture staff, including Chief of Civic Arts Strategies, Christine Jones, Senior Public Art Manager, Chuck Miller, and Civic Project Art Manager, Laura Bullock, as well as representatives from the City Attorney's Office. Before we get into today's agenda, I'm going to call on Chuck Miller to run down some of the guidelines for today's meeting. Chuck?
Thank you, Commissioner Meza, and good morning, everyone. A reminder that this meeting is a Zoom webinar and members of the public may join the meeting as webinar attendees to provide virtual, non-agenda, and agenda comment in real time. A reminder to note the buttons on the control bar at the bottom of the Zoom window to mute and unmute and turn the camera on and off. Please remember to stay muted when you are not talking and to unmute yourself when you speak. You also see a chat window button. Please keep your chat window open at all times as you'll be using the chat to signal when you'd like to speak. Please refrain from using the hand raising indicator and instead type speak in the chat window for the record, and the chair will acknowledge the requests in order. And finally, a reminder to refrain from using the meeting chat for anything other than signaling that you'd like to speak in order to comply with the Brown Act. Finally, I would like to note that consistent with commission and other committee meetings, we will acknowledge public comment after the presentation for the agenda item rather than before. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. And now for non-agenda public comment. The public was invited to submit public comment on agenda and non-agenda items via a web form accessible through the agenda and the commission website. Members of the public may also join this meeting as webinar attendees. If members of the public have submitted comments in writing via the web form, staff will read aloud public comment submitted per city public comment protocol. I will call on Chuck to read out aloud any non-agenda public comment or call on any attendees who would like to provide comment. Chuck?
So there was no comment submitted in writing, and seeing no attendees other than an artist who will be joining us shortly.
Thank you, Chuck. Now for the chair's report. At the last commission meeting on July 23rd, the commission voted to recommend the acceptance of the temporary exhibit of artwork proposals for the installation titled In the Balance by Risa Puno for Children's Museum Park, and the mural for the Stanley Park Recreation Center titled Sunburst California Scene by Andrew Sanchez. Thank you for your insightful feedback on those items at our last meeting. And now for the Public Art Committee meeting minute action item. Chuck, please read any public comment for this item that was submitted in writing and call on any attendees who would like to provide comment for this item.
There was no comment submitted in writing and no attendees other than future presenters.
Thank you, Chuck. I hope everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from the July 2nd, 2021 meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes as they are? If you would, please type speak on the chat window. And when I call on you, verbally state your name and make a motion. Tiffany?
Yes, my name is Tiffany Wying Barris. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Okay, thank you. A second? Anybody? Larry?
I second the motion.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now that we have a motion and a second, is there any discussion? Seeing none, if you would like to speak, please type speak on the chat window. Now we will take a vote. I will call your name and you will respond out loud with yay, nay, or abstain. Remember that you do not need to have been present at the July meeting to vote or discuss. Commissioner Jason Whooper.
Abstain.
Linda Caballero Sotelo.
Yay.
Anthony Graham. Melinda Guillen.
Yay.
Larry Herzog.
Yay.
An-Yum Park.
Yay.
Commissioner Doreen Schronburn. Tiffany Wei-Ying Bears.
Yay.
And my vote is a yay. Thank you. Now, we have a presentation for the schematic artwork proposal for Fairmont Avenue Fire Station by Susan Laguerreci. I would like to call on Chuck to provide an overview of the initiative and introduce the artist for the presentation. Chuck?
I apologize, Ben.
Mhm.
That text didn't get edited in the chair script.
Okay.
So the accurate presentation is for the temporary project ideas for the Park Social Initiative by various artists.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Commissioner Meza. Next slide, please. So today we are going to be basically hearing, seeing some preliminary project ideas from the artists who are under contract as part of the Park Social Initiative. And to kind of refresh your memory about what the Park Social Initiative is, a new initiative designed to commission local artists to produce thought-provoking, innovative projects for the city's park system. And so some of the objectives of that initiative are, as mentioned, produce innovative, thought-provoking, social-specific projects that relate to park space or spaces, to re-energize San Diego artists in their artistic practice and creative development, and to produce quality art interventions, interactions, and exchanges between park goers and parks, and to spark dialogue and encourage people to get out into the parks post-COVID-19 and experience them in new and unexpected ways. And I would also remind everybody that that Park Social was, when it was initiated and when we initiated an RFQ last spring and summer, that was one half of a $1 million artist relief initiative on behalf of the city, the other half of which was the collecting initiative SD Practice. So we're starting to get into seeing what the proposals are for Park Social, and we're excited to be presenting them to you today, and to have the some artists joining us to present their proposals. Basically, to give you a sense of kind of how this initiative is unfolding and what we're looking at in terms of the anticipated timeline kind of from here forward, is that this meeting and next, so our August and September Public Art Committee meetings, so the artists will be giving brief presentations of their project ideas, and are available for questions and answers. Later this fall, as we've further developed the proposals and are beginning to kind of solidify all of the details, staff will update the Public Art Committee and the Commission on these project developments. And in the fall and winter or late fall, early winter of 2021, we anticipate announcing the program and announcing kind of the master schedule of the rollout of these projects. And in early winter of 2022 is when we anticipate the program to officially launch and to begin implementing projects. So we've mostly worked through the selection and contracting phase at this point, and we've begun working with artists to develop ideas and have begun vetting those ideas. Next slide, please. So basically what we are going to be doing today is hearing from artists about their preliminary ideas. And to give you a sense of the scale of that, there were 18 artists selected for the initiative. And there were 2 artists per council district. So that is the arithmetic behind 18. And artists were assigned exploration zones and are free to explore and choose parks in the assigned zone. So the exploration zone is the boundaries of a given council district. And so we will be hearing 7 artist presentations today. And the presentations will be approximately 5 minutes, and then we'll move into a 5-minute Q&A. And I'll be timing this pretty closely so that we have time to engage with everybody's project or everybody's idea. And the artists are going to be making mention of certain parks that they are planning to work in and are exploring the possibilities of. I'd like to note that we are kind of in the process right now of actively evaluating the feasibility and all of the parameters that are going to be required for certain locations, and we are in the process of working through those details. So some of the parks that some of the artists might mention may be subject to change as the projects evolve. But with that, I'd like to get into welcome our first artist. So the first artist we have who will be presenting on the agenda today is Margaret Noble. So I'm just going to promote Margaret as a panelist. And so Margaret, if you can see and hear us, feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay, great. So all right, let's do this. Let's make sure you can see it. And I'll drag this over. So can everybody hear me and see my screen? Okay, great. I'll just get into it. I know time is limited. Thank you for having me. The project I am proposing is called Locked Groove, and I'm proposing the site of Plamusa Park in Point Loma. And a couple influences of my work and this project. One is visual music, and visual music has a few interpretations. For some, it's imagery and sound made from a common source. For others, it's sound influenced by imagery or imagery influenced by sound. And some visual music is purely visual, reflecting ideas of music and sound. And then graphic scores, for my purposes, is a set of visual graphics, experimental, artistic, that serve as a musical notation and an instruction for players. So all of these ideas will be influencing the idea I present to you today. My project is called Lock Groove, and I'm assuming many of you know maybe what a lock groove is. It is a technically on a vinyl record, a repeating section. Now they're on every vinyl record at the end, they're silent, but also artists often use lock grooves in creative ways. So do DJs in a variety of sonic outputs. So I like this very much kinetically. I also like it metaphorically. I like the idea of rhythmic cycles, and that is sort of the concept behind my work. And so for me, rhythmic cycles are a consequence and a necessity for living on a rotating planet. And so conceptually, graphically, and sonically, this project will be inspired by natural and unnatural clocks of life, rhythms of life. And some of my inspirations for these rhythms, sonically and visually, will be industrial, technological, biological, and environmental. I've chosen Plamosa Park for a couple of reasons. One, topically and geographically, it feels like a locked groove. You can travel around the perimeter of its landscaping repeatedly. And also there's an energy of people moving around the park, and machines and cars and bikes. So there's a lot of rhythm and rotations. And also it is encompassed by a suburban neighborhood, which has its own rhythms of life indoors, matched with the outdoor experience of the park. So formally, I'm going to read the description I have for Locked Groove, my proposal. Locked Groove is a looped graphical score that traces and morphs along the entire curbside edging of Point Loma's Plamosa Park. It presents a rhythmic visual design based on the rhythms of life, and also offers a multimedia engagement. Viewers can engage with this installation by walking around the perimeter of the park and imagining the sounds implied by the visuals, or viewers can engage with their digital devices on a custom app to interactively mix a sound art composition of the rhythms which influenced the graphical art on the park. And so thinking of the pigments, I wanted to address what they would be made of, which is temporary chalk pigments. They can last for a week or several months. It really depends on weather and traffic, but I would be budgeting in at the end of 6 months a power wash if they weren't faded by the end of the project. And then I wanted to address a little bit more about the app. So when audiences approach the park, they'll just see naturally the graphic look, but there'll be a sign with a QR code and instructions where they can, if they have a phone with them or a tablet, they can click on and open up an app which would have a description of the project. But also this app, once they hit play, would be a mixer with different faders of the different rhythms, a sound art composition that I would compose that inspired the visuals, and audiences would be able to turn on and off and isolate various sounds. Also, the visual app would have a reflection in its aesthetic design of what the park would look like on the curbside design. And finally, I just wanted to say that it wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't want audiences to feel required that they had to kind of rigidly listen to an app and move in a certain way with the graphics. I want it to be very loose. I think we all have our own internal rhythms and how we engage with visuals and sounds. And so it's just a starting base, but it'll be really different for different people. And these are just some of the books that I've been looking at to be inspired for this project. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Margaret. So we'll have 5 minutes or so of questions and answers, and then we can move on to the next presentation. So if you'd like to offer comment or have a question, type speak, and Ben or Commissioner Meza will call on you in order.
Tiffany?
Yeah, good morning, Margaret. Your idea is definitely really thought out and very intriguing. I love the idea of mixing different sort of perceptual stimulation and having people who, I mean, a lot of art viewers today engage with their phones, so it's interesting interplay. One question that I don't think you addressed that is, you said that the chalk lasts for a matter of days to weeks, but it's going to be up for 6 months. Does that mean that you will continually go back to the park and continue to sort of paint? And so in that sense, it's a continually evolving work?
No, I guess I'm going to let Mother Nature take its course. So if the pigments remain so strong up to the 6-month duration, then I just wanted to address that I'd be responsible for clearing it off. But I think they'll last for quite a bit, and I was just going to let it kind of naturally fade as part of the project.
So I guess my concern is what if the opposite is true? Like, what if we have a big rainstorm and the pigments are gone in a day or two?
Well, I certainly could have a budget, and I'll write that in my notes to address it. I've done a lot of tests with the pigments, and I don't know if even a big storm would take them away, but I think it's definitely something I should put a budget in for. So thank you for that feedback, Tiffany.
This has been, and I am familiar with that park. I drive by it as I go to a job site over on Catalina and Chatsworth. I think it's a beautiful idea, and the idea of putting it right in the middle of a neighborhood in that beautiful park I think it's a fantastic work. I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
Margaret, one other question I had is for passers-by who don't realize that part of an artwork and don't necessarily know about this app that you're building. I mean, the app itself is going to take a lot of time and effort to put together. How do you intend to get people to download the app? What kind of signage are you thinking about? And then is there a sort of afterlife to the app? It kind of, to me anyway, seems like you're putting a lot of work into creating something that's very temporal. But this app, the thing about technology is it can last for a long time. So I wonder if you're thinking about maybe a way that this app can live on, maybe even documenting what you've put together and thinking about its afterlife.
So I think you had several questions in there, right? So one was the sign and connecting audiences with the app, and then the duration of the app. So I guess I want to say right off the bat, if folks never deal with their devices, that is perfectly lovely to me. And that's why I'm trying to keep it really open, that there's a variety of ways to engage with it. If you want to hear the rhythm in your mind of what you're thinking, I think that's still a lovely completion of the work. But I wanted, because I'll be thinking sonically and I work in sound, I wanted to offer that app. And it will just be hosted at a URL, so they won't have to download it. I feel like those are clunky when you have to deal with like downloading an app. So literally they can it'll be a website essentially. And I'm gonna really try to make it as user-friendly as possible with like push one button and that's it, right? So just thinking on that. And then moving forward, like I'm always really interested in maintaining a legacy for the work. And so I can imagine that even if it turns out, well, it will turn out that we won't have that graphical score around Plamosa Park anymore, I will have beautiful documentation of it. So I will have a web page with that narrative up, and I don't see why I wouldn't have that app again, and at least hear the sonic inspirations for the big picture of the work. Did I answer all your questions, Tiffany?
I don't think you addressed the issue about the sign or like the physical presence. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I mean, in my mind, I was thinking of not making it too complicated, but maybe just like an embedded, like a real street sign that has maybe title and name. And if you maybe a sense, if you'd like to hear the work, click on the QR code with your camera phone. Like, I don't want to make it overly complicated. I'm open to suggestions if an artist statement is suggested. If I should do more with that sign, I'm definitely open to that as well.
I'm not familiar with the park. Maybe I know, Ben, maybe with your background, since you know it so well, it seems like it's going to be walkable, but are there multiple entrances? Like, how?
It's in the middle of a neighborhood, and it's accessible from all sides. And it's really pleasant. It's like a meadow with a big lawn. And when I drive by it, there's always something happening. There's kids playing or someone having a picnic. It's just a very active and engaging space. I think this would be perfect for that.
Thanks everybody for all their comments. I should
Yes.
probably we should probably continue with the presentations, and thank you so much for sharing your idea, Margaret, and looking forward to continuing to work with that. Our next artist presenting will be Trevor Amory. So I'm just going to make Trevor a panelist. And all right.
Hello.
So
Can you hear me, Chuck?
yes, I can hear you. Hello, Trevor.
Hello.
Give me 1 second here. Just trying to. One sec. Okay, sorry, I'm just, Margaret, if you're still there, could you unshare your screen? Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, technical difficulties there. So whenever you're ready, Trevor, you can share your screen.
Great. All right. Well, first, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time and considering my project and proposal. I really appreciate it. And getting right to it, the project I am proposing is for Kensington Park. And the working title at the moment is Barely Touching, possibly Barely Touching the Surface. Still working on that. And the project is inspired by San Diego, geology, thinking about the ocean. Personally, as a surfer, that's reoriented my relationship to living in San Diego in a lot of ways. And I wanted to make something that touched upon San Diego's site, its geological context, as well as means of transformation. So this was inspired by the water, but also erosion and geologic processes in regards to rocks. So with this project, there will be one piece that sits in the middle of Kensington Park that is going to be about a 10 to 12 foot platform. And I'm going to scroll back and forth between these slides, both directions, just to point out certain elements. It'll be a platform constructed of wood I'm working with San Diego Urban Timber as well as a few other places to source the material. The platform will be about 10 to 12 feet in diameter, no taller than 2 feet. And it will be carved on, it'll look like the surface of water in a way, and kind of reflect that kind of rippled surface of water. And then in that will be carved floating kelp and possibly other plants for people to do rubbings with. As well as there will be other rock structures closer to the pathway for those with ADA to have access to as well, to participate if they would like to do rubbings, as that's the main point of the project. Here's a test one here. So it would be illustrations like this throughout the structure, and on top of the structure that children can lay on, sit on, put paper on, and then do rubbings of, or put up against the rocks and do rubbings on the rocks using just paper and crayons. It was important for me to think about what would draw people to participate and want to touch. I think it's important that art feels accessible. And so for me, I wanted there to be multiple points of contact and for this to be very high touch. I chose this location because of its access, its proximity to the playground on the other side of this building, as well as a meeting point right in the heart of Kensington. So I really like that this was high visibility, but also there are a lot of children around here. There's a yoga studio around here. A lot of people are just walking around. So to me, there's a high foot traffic activity. It's an active playground that would bring a lot of people to it, but I also want them to feel like they can play and participate. And so I was thinking about the wave structure kind of working on multiple levels as, you know, a platform, a stage. Children can stand on it or lay on it or sit on it, as it will be about bench height. And then do rubbings and drawings. So I want to engage the community in multiple ways through workshops on the weekends. Every few weekends, do some workshops with kind of teaching people how to build their own drawings, making rubbings where they can overlay. So it becomes a sculpture and an installation that hopefully becomes a meeting point, a place to bring people together, but then also a means to kind of make more artworks for the children however they want, or adults. It's not just for kids, can definitely participate as well. And so if there's any questions, happy to answer. I don't know if I'm close to my time limit or not.
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, so if we can go right into Q&A. So.
Let's see.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Doreen.
Hi. I think that it's a wonderful idea. I do have some questions. You're saying this is wood, the larger circular formation?
Yes.
Okay, so what kind of wood is that?
I think it'll probably most likely be ash. So something that is going to be handle the outdoor weather well, and won't warp or get weird over time outside and exposed to the elements in the sun. And also a lighter color wood that won't become hot to the touch, which is important as well.
And what kind of covering would you have over it? Like, my concern is that the children would be fascinated to draw right on there, and I love it. But having worked with children, it would be something that would be very attractive to them. I have a couple questions. Also, the availability of paper. They would have to know to bring paper with them, and I wonder if there's any material that you could dispense. I mean, probably not, that they can use. And then as far as bringing crayons, I think it's a great idea because it heightens their sensory perception of things and makes them more appreciative of nature and natural formations, which I think is, and how beautiful it can be. But I just have some concerns about keeping it clean and keeping it and making sure that kids have the materials. And also signage as well, but I guess that's something that you'll have to.
Definitely.
Yeah.
To answer your questions, I think it would be some experiments. It would be a paste wax or a polyurethane. So I would do some experiments to figure out what would be the best. Also, being wood and me living in San Diego, it's something I could personally very easily upkeep if need be. But I don't foresee that being too much of an issue just because I'm close. And depending on what surface treatment I figure out to be the best one, that will kind of guide whatever that decision is. And then in regards to paper, I think that I want this to work on multiple levels. So for the rubbings and the drawings, I think the workshops will be the place and the time for that. So on the weekends, for there to be these activities that happen, where I'll be providing paper and crayons and resources in order to participate. And then hopefully that will become a bit infectious and people will know they can participate that way, or they can bring their own, and there can be some information on that, on some plaques, that they can do that, but then also that it doesn't depend on the rubbing to be activated. And that it can simply be, you know, I mean, gosh, children on a stage, they seem to always have fun with that. So that's not the only means that will make it active.
Mhm. Well, I think it's a wonderful project. And
Thank you.
the fact that it'll be a group activity primarily makes a lot of sense to me. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's see, Tiffany.
Hi, Trevor. I also really like the idea of your project, and the way that, again, you're engaging with multiple sensories. I think it really fits the idea of this park social. You kind of touched upon it, but you know, one of our jobs is to make sure that every work of public art sort of fits safety protocols. You sort of touched upon the idea of you know, ADA, but the work itself is big. I mean, 10 feet, 10 to 12 feet. So you said that you kind of mentioned it, but if people are climbing on top of it, are you thinking about sort of the safety of, yeah, it's sort of robustness over with weight. And then also with these rocks as well, that's maybe less of a concern, but moving them, you're going to have to find the right balance between something big enough that you can transport it there, but that it's also not small enough that it's going to be able to topple over or move.
Right. Well, great questions. Thank you for asking. With the rocks, I foresee those being staked into the ground to keep them from rolling in any way. And if I need to put a little bit of a concrete anchor underneath, I can do that. And would be easy to remediate the land afterwards. And then for safety, for the platform, part of the safety will be in its scale, as it won't want to teeter or totter. It's going to have an understructure that will keep it totally solid, and it'll be mounted to. And it's also going to be no taller than 2 feet. So that way it can't, you know, really fall on anyone. So really kind of about bench height. So, I mean, kind of one way to think about it is a big bench in the round, in a way that will be secured and secured to the ground so that the top doesn't slide off the base and then it's not going to go anywhere. And then it's important for me with the rocks as well, for them to be close to the pathway so that they are accessible for ADA as well, so everyone can participate.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, everybody, for all your comments. Looking forward to continue working on this project as well. So with that, we'll continue. Thanks again, Trevor. And let's see if you don't mind unsharing your screen. So the next artist will be that we'll be seeing a presentation from is artists Brian Black and Ryan Bullis. So they make up the artist team duo, Brian and Ryan. So I'm just going to bring them on. Right. We can see Ryan. Ryan, can you hear us?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. So whenever you're ready, you can share your screen and we can begin.
Hi.
Yeah, Ryan's gonna go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for being here today. My name is Ryan Bulis, and I'm Ryan of the team Brian Ryan, and as you heard, Brian is here as well. But I'll be doing the presentation just to make this go as smooth as possible. But he's available for comment and to answer any questions you guys may have. So I wanted to start to kind of give you a little background on the park that we chose, which is Choice Lake Park. It's a very enchanting park, kind of in the heart of our district. The main feature of that park is this reservoir. It's kind of central to the whole space. And that's one element that we're really attracted to. Surrounding that park are the eucalyptus trees that are so common here in San Diego and in California. And we're really just attracted to their kind of, I guess, how foreign they are in the center of the city, and yet you're stepping into like this wilderness environment. And the other aspect is the kind of rustic nature of the park that is filled with activities. And we found that people really do engage with all aspects of the park, from the recreation areas that are more like playgrounds. It's a youth fishing in the reservoir itself. And we see families there constantly every time we visit the park, and people jogging and running and building puzzles and doing martial arts. So it's just an incredibly engaged space. And it really appealed to two aspects of our interests, one being activities and sports, recreation, and the intersection of kind of nature and kind of more human culture. And I kind of love that the trees themselves have been integrated in different parts and fixtures of the park, including the playground, railings, and so on. And we're kind of going to embody those spirits in this rendering. You have us kind of engaging with the wilderness aspect and the recreation component. And what we're proposing is a suite of interventions within the park that will culminate in a series of high-end kind of documentation, studio lighting, and really creating images out of those experiences. And we'll see this happening in several phases. And that, again, they'll culminate in the documentation that will then be presented in several formats. One of them as these kind of billboard structures that will be placed directly in the park, and the other, these kind of more engaging pamphlets that will have documentation, but activities that will then draw the viewers back out into the park to explore the interventions that we've placed. So in whole, our desire is to inspire and have even those who frequent the park to see that park in kind of a new way, because you introduce these new elements, and then that can be kind of an exciting thing and engages you to go out and consider things that you hadn't previously. How many trees are there in the park? How many, what kind of fish are in the water, and so on. And the phases I'll break down into these four phases. The first is gathering insights and stories about the park directly from the public. And so we see engaging with these kind of boxes that will have some kind of tablet with questions that will then ask members of the community to share stories about the park. And they'll be somewhat site specific, right? So one at the entryway at the main parking lot might ask one question versus the one that might be placed on the dock might ask something more specific to fishing, or like the largest fish you've ever caught. Or we're just really interested in engaging the public and helping us create what some of those interventions and images might be when we move on. We're also looking into potentially borrowing some of the existing structures to have more interpersonal space where we would talk directly to the public and share stories. Every time we've been there, we've accidentally engaged the public in that they've shared many stories with us. And so some of these interventions that we've already kind of outlined are from those conversations. And so without going into too much detail on each of these are kind of possibilities, and we understand feasibility of these interventions will vary, and we're kind of working through those problems. But phase 2 would be building and placing interventions in the park. So one thought we had was engaging with the water itself and how things flow in the water, and potentially awakening that surface of the water using these kind of remote or buoy-like structures that reference back to different aspects of the park. So the blue barrels are what the recycling bins are in the park, and you can barbecue in the park, and there's many kind of rustic signage, and obviously there's many waterfowl. And so we just were picturing and potentially doing a day by which these vessels might go through the water, kind of exciting people in the crowd. This is based on Extreme Ironing, which was a calendar series, and kind of going out into these areas that would be kind of strange sites for ironing. This is kind of based on wood carving, and this is something we're pretty interested in. And there's many kind of fell logs and stumps that seem like they're available for that kind of carving, and kind of playing with the scenario, kind of personifying these figures that we may make. How the structures are all based on play is a big part of it. And so we've invented these kind of log-based slide and swings, which may have varying feasibility. And then phase 3, whatever interventions that are temporary or more permanent would culminate in some documentation with like purposeful placement of figures in the space. And that would then, we would be re-inviting public participation as subjects in those reenactments and interventions. So we saw someone drawing on the shore, and it just reminded us of like making words. And so there's kind of a blurring the line between document and authorship of these images, at least as we picture it. This is based on a story where a family comes every Sunday and visits what they think is the same duck. And I just pictured that as kind of an interesting image. And then again, those in phase 4 will then, those images themselves would make their way into some kind of public display. And we're working through some of that feasibility, but it would exist in several formats. We really think about the photographic document as the kind of the final art piece. And so as many ways as we can make that available to the public, we're really interested in. So whether it's the printed material or the signage billboard directly in the park, we're really interested in both of those things. And this just a rendering we've done to kind of think about how to place those as easily in the water as possible. So just really trying to think through all of the possibilities. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Ryan. So yeah, now if there's any questions that you have for Brian and Ryan. I think I see on.
Thanks. Hi, in Junk Park. I was just wondering what the style or aesthetic of the billboards or the pamphlet will be. Like, are the images that you showed us reflective of the style of some of the illustrations?
That's a good question. So these are, and maybe I should have clarified that, these are renderings that we've been working through. So the documentation would be photographic in nature. So we've just tried to kind of think about how we would maybe frame these images almost like a storyboard. So these aren't, obviously, we're not out there making these photographs yet, but we envision them as photographic documents.
And then it looks like we had Tiffany next.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I was on mute talking to myself, but all right. Tiffany.
Yeah, Ben and Brian, I'm really intrigued by your project. It seems like you guys are going to have a really fun time engaging with park over time. But like, and I have just some questions about sort of how this project is going to materialize. So you said you're going to create photographs. I assume they're photographs of you in these of it sort of acting, not necessarily acting out, but as performing your acts. Because if you're photographing the public, I'm just concerned about permissions and things like this. So are you going to be sort of staging like almost acting or engaging actors as you do these things? So that's one. Because also, like, I think it's really clever, the idea of creating these slides out of logs and swings, but obviously you wouldn't necessarily want the public on those swings. So yeah, so I guess I'm just trying to figure out, is this sort of like staged, and then you're just putting these really provocative images into the space? Is that sort of what you're doing? Sorry, just to clarify.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think the hope was that some of these interventions can be more durational and that they won't pose a health or safety issue. And obviously, yeah, some of them seem less feasible. And so it's maybe, the hope is for them to be an authored image with a bit more kind of like the stage setting. And what we're hoping is someone might become invested in maybe their own story that they share with us and would be interested in acting out that that part in a discrete photograph. Yeah. Rather than documenting how an object would be sincerely interacted with, I think is how we envision it. So our hope is that there can be both. There can be interventions that do have like a true interaction with the public. Even if it's a floating object in the water, we care that the public is going to have this kind of awakening in that moment, kind of special. But we also, the final document then kind of inspires you to look at the whole park as a playground, if you will. Even if it's somewhat of a authored image or
I personally really love, I mean, your project is so ambitious, and granted you have 6 months to really make this happen, but to get other people's stories and put your own and, put the signs up and then produce this final documentation. This is, I mean, it's a lot of time and effort on both of your parts. I'm almost wondering if you don't want to kind of narrow the focus down, like I really love the idea of putting those informational feedback areas up and having people write their stories. But maybe you, like, if you want to just capitalize on that, like focusing on those public stories and then seeing if they'd be willing to re-engage them and make, I mean, it just feels like you have a lot of moving parts here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want, of course, to stifle creativity, but I'm kind of wondering what the overall intent and narrative is here that both of you are thinking of. So I don't know, I'm, as someone who's as a curator by heart, I always love having a sort of idea that sort of is carrying out this your intention. So I encourage you both to think about that.
Okay. Anybody else?
Dan?
Yes.
Doreen, for some reason, I don't think I'm putting my speak in the right place or when I wanted to say something.
No problem. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I think I love this idea. I think I think it's only up for 6 months, correct?
6 months is kind of the framework, the total possible duration for a given thing. So
Mhm.
everything would have to occur in 6 months. Yes.
Okay. So I thought to expedite good stories, you might want to just advertise in the community paper your project and get some stories that way. Maybe it would expedite this effort rather than depending on the people to write their stories. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it because I love the idea of being at the park and doing something creative, like creative writing and something like autobiographical for families, something they've, memories they've shared. I love that idea, but you might want to, get some input from other people for good stories that maybe an older person who doesn't get to the park anymore or but has some great insight or stories to tell. I think it's wonderful. I'm not clear. In one of the posters I see you're depicted, which I love. There you are with your beard, your plaid shirt. There you are. I see you there. So I kind of like that sometimes an artist will put himself in a painting, and I think that makes it very personal. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a particular family shot. You could have some fun because it's a very creative idea. And there's so much you can do with that, but you and your partner might want to, make a statement and let the public know who you are and who the artists are and the kind of sense of humor that you have and the appreciation for nature and community. So, but there's so many aspects to this. It's a little overwhelming. I'm not clear on the slide, which I love, the cannon slide with the tree trunk. That's something you're saying this is going to be more sculptural, just something to appreciate. This is not going to be something that would be safe.
Yeah, I think, and I could see why some of these initial renderings would lead us into certain directions. These were how we were kind of imagining, without any restrictions, what we'd love to see as we relate with the park itself. And we recognize that there are feasibility issues with many of these interventions. And whereas something like this has a lot less infrastructure and health and safety kind of concerns. And we were working out the feasibility. Like there are some things we know we can't do, like we can't hang anything from trees. We've come to find out. But what we did, to answer a few of your questions, one is that our kind of history of work that we've done over the last 16 years does involve us very directly as performers and as the subject of photographs. And so we definitely imagine ourselves being peppered into these documents in some form. And I guess it's an opportunity because we've found ourselves being very singular in our roles and our personas in the work. And we've begun to bring other people into the work kind of slowly. So we have been engaging the public. We've been collecting stories with these helmets around the country where people come up directly and whisper into our ears. And it just felt like an evolution to reapproach these kind of public interventions and reenactments, that it would only be natural to bring the audience maybe into it. And we know many people who live in this area, many artists that live in this area, and I'm absolutely open to soliciting for a broader range of stories through something like a newspaper or even a Facebook post or something to kind of widen our scope. But I do imagine there's a population already interested in showing up, sharing stories, and participating. So
Absolutely. I
yeah,
think
I agree. I think there are some many moving parts here that we are. I guess what we've presented are possibilities, and we know it's very likely that we'll be narrowing that focus quite a bit.
well, I love it. I think it's awesome.
I'm going to add one quick thing in if you guys can hear me. We've been to the park several times, and it's unique in the sense that the park, like the people that go there sort of like feel ownership, or they feel their ownership in it. They kind of naturally share stories. So we've kind of already like unofficially started to collect stories without even having to solicit in any real way. So
I hear you. I understand. That's wonderful.
Okay, thanks so much again for your presentation, Brian and Ryan, and thanks everybody for your questions and comments. So we'll be looking forward to that, and for now we'll be moving on. So the next artist we'll be hearing from is Keenan Hartston, and so I'm going to go ahead and promote Keenan.
Thank you.
Keenan, you're whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm here. Make sure. Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
So yeah, thank you so much for taking a moment to hear about my work, what I'm proposing, and yeah, I guess we'll just get right into it. Yes. Let's see here. Do you guys see that screen share?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, there's so much that I could share, and in 5 minutes, I'm going to try to do my best job to get as comprehensive of a scope of what it is that I'm thinking, and kind of the origination of what it is that I was kind of inspired by. But basically, just kind of getting a little bit of a backstory. I'm not that familiar with my district. And so it's up in Poway, Rancho Penasquitos, all these different areas that I have never really had a lot of experience with. I was really interested in those areas because of that, though. And so when I started to look at the list of the different parks, I was like pretty overwhelmed in thinking about this really huge territory and really not knowing how to exactly break it down and understand what parks would be the ones to engage with, what, really what I wanted to do, and just kind of what would be a genesis of an idea for integrating into a park or a series of parks up there. So I did a couple trips, and then one trip was really special as like just a site visit where I came across this park called South Creek Park, and I was, it's a sort of a, kind of an average park, has a play set, has a beautiful lawn areas, and it has like a big kind of an open area that has like a baseball diamond and a field, and around this diamond and the field there's this walking path. And after I'd spent some time in the park, I was like, I saw these people walking on the outside perimeter of this path, and basically I was like, well, I'm gonna just kind of walk that path and see if I get any inspiration around from walking this path. And at the outside of the path, there's at the far side of the park, there's like this gate that led on to this other kind of trail in this sort of more natural area. And make a long story short, I went through this gate, went down this trail, and basically encountered this other trail, and it sort of wove down into this sort of park, or this kind of a natural environment that was by this creekside. And what I ended up finding was this place that has been coined Narnia, a place that I'd never heard about. And it's this really incredible environment where it's sort of this lagoon, this creek flow with this like lagoon area. And it's these series of like stacked boulder formations that are covered in years of essentially community engagement, art making on these boulders. And I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is such an incredible environment. It has such a mystical, peaceful, engaged, participatory quality to it. And I was like, how can I essentially take this idea and flush it out into a park sort of environment? And so I started to think about, there had been some other sort of ruminations. I had been interested in tires without really getting into that, but I'd start to kind of think about like, how can I incorporate some other ideas that I've been thinking about and sort of like roll them all into a way that I could basically engage with these communities in different levels. In fact, multiple stratifications of levels, in order to create this master artwork that felt like it was a community offering at every level of the whole thing. And so I was looking at tires, and I had started to collect tires, and I was really interested in the patterns that were found in tires. And, and especially trash tires, essentially like tires that are no longer having any service or any function utility. And so I was looking at all these different patterns, and I was thinking about I was like, wow, this is a really incredible way that I could potentially take those stacked boulder painted forms and sort of incorporate them into making an environment. I am a maker of different sorts, but one of the things is making of musical instruments and musical environments. And so I knew I wanted to do something musical, but I also am really interested in sort of like context and setting. And so to create this setting for an experience to happen and not just bring an instrument to a park, but actually create an environment that like the specific environment I want to create, and how to do that cost effectively, how to make how to essentially like bang for buck impact, but also create this connection to this Narnia place, which was like essentially a community artwork. And so I was like, you know what, if I collected tires and I started to give them out to people with essentially paintbrushes, and essentially maybe some beginning cues of ideas that could start to get people cued into what does it mean to, what does it mean to essentially be a community? What does it mean to collaborate? What does it mean to be a person, have your personal needs, wants, desires, but then also interface with needs, wants, and desires of other people? So I would essentially ask beginning cues of questions, and then essentially would have these tires for people to paint individually, and that they could essentially fill in these tires as kind of a paint by numbers thing, any way that they wanted. There's grooves, there's basic positive, negative spaces. And essentially like what I would do with these tires is recollect them back at the end, and then essentially create these tire stacks, kind of like are listed on this or shown on this page. And what I would do with those is have those be the sort of central pillars of this space that I would like to create. That would be something more like this. I got really interested in like the idea of community and what it looks like to participate together collaboratively. And essentially like if we want, even post-pandemic, which is a huge impetus for this project, if we want to, if we're looking to essentially reboot the world or essentially re-engage in a participatory, collaborative way with our fellow human beings, I really got interested in the idea of bees and the idea of bee colonies and essentially like hexagons, and what bees are making are these essentially these large hexagonal structures that are co-created, that are co-created, and they're co-created with these really minute, they're co-created with like the spirit of the effort, and even the communication is this really dynamic, interesting process with which this thing gets made. And so essentially what I'm proposing here, 6 tire stacks of 6 tires, for a total of basically 60 overall tires. I think that most likely there's going to have to be a stack in the middle to support this thing that I'll show you later on, which is like a shade structure. But essentially like working with the idea.
Hey, Keenan, sorry to interrupt, but we about a minute and a half.
Okay.
If that's okay. Yep.
Totally. 100%. Yep. And so basically, so in this environment, there'd be these stacks. There would be essentially an overhead pipe structure. There'd be a hexagonal pipe structure. Inside this footprint would be various musical instruments, xylophones, bell structures, different things that I will make, have made, have some of them already at the ready. And then also within this footprint, I would essentially offer chalk and offer essentially a large participatory chalk mural to happen underneath and throughout this musical installation that's happening. I'll just jump over to this other page. I have titled this thing the Honeycomb Harmonies, just thinking again, queuing back to the bees and thinking about this sort of participatory environment. I'd like to do this in 6 different parks. All the parks are listed here: Jerebeck, Scripps Ranch, South Creek, Rolling Hills, Views West, and Hilltop Community Park. They would happen over the course of the 6 months, probably once a month. The times would sort of be like maybe from like noon to like 6 or something like that, roughly in that sort of a range. And then over, like I was saying, over this structure, I'd like to create essentially a shade sail type of a situation so that people are not like, it's going to be middle of summer. And I just noticed in a lot of the parks, if without shade, you're essentially offering a very potentially like, very, the sun is going to be beating down on these people. So that doesn't really contribute to a great time. So, yeah, so that's basically the short form of it.
Thank you, Keenan. And so any questions and answers now?
Let's see, 10, 20. Larry? Larry, did you want to speak?
Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I thought I clicked on it. Keenan, I really liked the story that you told on how you how your thinking evolved, and then you came up with this, the stacking of the tires with the color, inspired by this place that you discovered walking in one of the parks. I really like that. And I think there's something to that. And then I think you should maybe think about documenting that story itself, because it's very interesting. And it's something that I'm very interested in, which is the idea of placemaking, of how your artwork evokes a sense of place in each of these parks. So one thing I was thinking, though, is that you made a big leap. You were at one park and you talked about what inspired you there, all that color and people creating community. And so you created this idea, and it felt like that idea fit that park because of where you discovered it. And now you're taking it to these other parks. So I'm just wondering, if you're going to do that, how you can rationalize taking this hexagon thing and making it appropriate to the sense of place of the other 5 parks that you have in your story. Because I really like the way the story moved me in how you discovered it in the one park, and now you're transporting it to these other places. So if you're going to do that, I think that's the last missing part of explaining the context of what you're doing. But great work. I really like it a lot. Really interesting the way you abstracted to this tires and the music and all of that. I just feel like it feels like it ought to speak to the places as well.
And thank you so much. Yeah. So one of the things that is the area that I found that Narnia place is actually not part of the park. It's in sort of a natural environment that's behind the park. And you really have to like work your way down through there on this pathway to get there. So it's actually like, what I was really inspired by was the fact that I discovered it in general and that it became such an impetus. But if you're in South Creek Park, I would say that like many people that go to South Creek Park, I don't know percentage wise, but they would never know that there's this place. And then there are a lot of people that know in San Diego of this place, but they're not the people that are going to go to South Creek Park. They're almost like 2 different sets of people. And so I would like that story of the discovery to imbue into the artwork, but it's not actually about South Creek Park or any of these parks. What I'm really culling from that experience and even the energetics of that space are the spirit of joy, exuberance, collective expression, even peacefulness, calm, tranquility, like there's a harmonic element that's happening there that was like a real tie-in that I would actually like to bring the spirit of that to these parks that have like established structures, established forms, established playgrounds, equipment, and to bring that sort of more broken open community kind of like art making experience.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I'll just quickly add that even that idea that you discovered something just on the other side of the park might itself become part of the story, so that you encourage all the people in those parks to go off and discover something, and the place can evoke the sense of being curious about your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's as simple as that, but yeah, I appreciate what you said. That's great. Yeah.
Tiffany?
Hi,
Hi.
Keenan. As a new mom, and I one thing that just struck me off the bat, I don't know how many people are familiar with this, but you're gonna have to be careful with those tires, because my understanding is that tires emit gas that's carcinogenic, especially when it's exposed to sunlight. So it's a great idea. I love the idea of these collaborative things, but if you're thinking about kids, I'm imagining that a lot of moms like me would have some concerns about that. So something to think about. And just in terms of safety as well, I don't think I heard you address, is this structure, the honeycomb structure that you're building, is that separate for each park? And if so, are you thinking about a stabilizing structure, or is it some like a temporary installation that you're bringing and then moving it, 2 weeks later to a different park? Is that, if it's just a temporary thing, I'm not worried about it. But if you're thinking long-term, I'm definitely concerned about the use of tires, because there's so many like terrible things that go into making rubber tires.
Totally. And, I'm actually familiar with that. I have a 5-year-old. So as another parent as well, I actually, even because of that, I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to take these tires, power wash them. I think I'm going to prime them all and paint them all black, and then give them to people and hope that sort of contains a little bit of that potential. And having said that, though, is basically these tire stacks, there's going to be essentially like a 20-foot wide hexagonal structure. So these tires are extremely separate from each other and even from the musical installation itself. And so essentially it's outdoors. Hopefully there's a little bit of wind. I don't know, but basically what I'm thinking is the distance away and just like how they are. I think that it will be, you're not going to have kids kids are not climbing on these things. They're looking at them. They're sort of like swirling around them, but they're not exactly like directly interfacing them in a way that maybe parents have been worried about, like the rubber chips for kids in the playgrounds and stuff like that. And then as far as about the temporary nature, these are just one-day events. I'm thinking about 6 one-day events. These tire stacks will be essentially weighted on the bottom, and then I'll create essentially like a probably like a wood bottom and a top for these tire stacks, wherein this pipe will drop down into this tire stack form, but will be held by essentially an internal structure inside the tire stack. And then it will just essentially create like a simple pop-up shade structure that'll be custom, but it'll essentially create like pipe structure shade for this area. So yeah, but temporary one-day events.
Okay. Any other comments? I think it's a beautiful idea, Keenan. And like Larry said, it's a wonderful story, and I hope you can develop it to a point where it's seen in all these different parks. I think it's a great idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Keenan, and thanks for all of the comments. So I'm, in interest of time, I'm going to kind of keep moving things forward. So looking forward to continue working on that. But I'm going to introduce our next artist. We have an artist team Beck Haberstroh and Katie Garitlian. So I'm going to be introducing Katie to present their presentation.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. Hopefully my internet survives this. Okay. Can we see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to also time myself so I keep myself accountable. Okay. Thanks y'all so much for your time today, and to Chuck and Laura for all of your help. My name is Katie Garitlian, and I am one of the artists participating in the Park Social Initiative, working alongside my collaborator, Beck Haberstroh. Beck and I, did we see the slides advanced? Just making sure. Great. Beck and I are friends and longtime collaborators who met while working at an arts nonprofit in Brooklyn. Beck moved to San Diego for UCSD's MFA program, and I'm between Southern California and New York for context of where we are. I hope you don't hear those sounds. Our work together often engages the systems of photography and imaging technologies, ranging from workshops to performances, to installations. And so here you see an example of work tour guides. A bit about our district. We've been assigned District 5 and are most excited to work at Hilltop Community Park, but are also interested in working at Rancho Bernardo Community Park or Scripps Ranch Community Park. When researching our district, we came across striking aerial photographs to survey the land for the creation of master planned communities. This led us to think about the role of aerial photography in urban development. And beyond our site, we've seen how San Diego broadly relies upon aerial imaging and surveillance technology, as in the case of smart streetlights. So we've been thinking about how aerial photography operates invisibly and without public consent, or how it can, and is used and can be used to reshape and control landscapes and communities. So with our Park Social project, we offer a playful and liberatory alternative that invites critical engagement, a la the kite pinhole camera. So to do this, we've constructed we have not done this yet, plan to construct a set of kites that carry analog pinhole cameras. The pinhole camera will be a lightweight box affixed to the flying line of the kite. The shutter will be remotely activated from the ground, which we are working on prototyping soon via microcontrollers. We can image onto film or paper. This is how it got a little diagram of operation. Image onto film or paper, depending on whether we aim to develop them on site. We plan to use a hexagonally shaped Rokoku kite because they're easy to launch and fly in a stable pattern. If we decide to partner with local artists on the kite design, Rokokus also offer a great canvas. Kite aerial photography is and it's often used in archaeology, CAP for short. While CAP practitioners aim for high resolution, sharp digital images that can be used to mine for data, our pinhole cameras will instead produce blurry, distorted images, and beyond that aesthetic of the blur of the blurry image that they'll produce, we appreciate working with pinhole technology because it is so simple. It can be used as a photo pedagogy tool to show the process of making an image to its rudimentary form. To house materials, greet visitors, and temporarily display prints for pickup, we plan to design mobile and fabric-based temporary installations that can be easily assembled and disassembled akin to a tent. Poles will hold textiles, making it very easy to assemble and disassemble. And they'll have a similar, like the kites, they'll invite play and engagement, moving with the wind. It'll be very light. So how exactly will this all work? Imagine that you are a visitor, sorry, sounds, to the park on a day when our installation is live. On your drive up, you see kites flying in the distance. You get out of your car and you see temporary displays flowing in the wind below the kites. When you walk up, you are greeted by one of us or by one of the photography students that we will have trained as docents. You were given a brief introduction to the project. If you decide to participate, you are given a short intake form. This form will ask you where you'd like your photo to be sent, how you'd like to be credited, and it'll also offer reflective questions to consider while participating and kind of holding you accountable to this process of imaging. After filling out the form, you are given a kite to fly. Oh no, we got two, okay. At some point in the journey of your kite, you decide that you'd like to see what it sees. You press a button and the shutter snaps. You return the kite to the docent, and at some point in the near future, you return to pick up your photo print, or it is brought to you or wherever you decided which archive you wanted to live. To draw expanded participation and energize the collective potential of the installation, we will also plan a series of programs in collaboration with community partners. For instance, we could work together to stage performances or craft signage that is then documented from the air by the kite cameras. Or as a project finale, we might orchestrate a kite parade and ask participants to document the parade with the kite cameras. By working with partners, we can develop actions that address their dreams for how they would like to be represented and what message they'd want to send to the community. Through partnerships, we can also pair this project with more direct actions and materials to support organizing efforts demanding community oversight of the use of surveillance technology. And I'm almost done. We have started meeting with potential partners, and here are some of them: Aja Project, Taros Gallery, Tech Workers Coalition, to name a few. And as you've now heard, our project offers a chance for participants to engage with the life cycle of photography, the consideration of what or how you want to image something, the making of the picture itself, and the decision of photography at large. Each of these steps allows for understanding and joy. And with partners, activations, and discussions is just an entry point into the continued organizing work and discursive work of talking about photography systems. Thank you so much for your time today, and we're very excited to hear your questions and thoughts and wonders.
Thank you, Katie. So any questions that committee members may have?
On you.
Hi, thank you, in Jung Park. I'm really excited about this idea as somebody who drives around with kites in their trunk just in case. So I'm really into it, but also, you know, it has really hearty intellectual basis that I also identify with in terms of surveillance and aerial photography, as my school teaches drone photography on a regular basis. But I was just wondering, do you know if the hilltop, or does anyone know if this particular location is perpetually windy? Just in case, to make sure, because that's such a huge, I mean, if it's not, it doesn't work. But I know there are pockets of our city where it is perpetually windy. So I just wanted to make sure that this was one of those places.
Why we love Hilltop. I love, if someone else in this room has an answer, please respond, or has a response. Why we love Hilltop so much is because it's we felt the wind's presence, but that is why Hilltops are number one, is because of its elevation and also the circular nature of it. Let me go back. Oh, those are emails. This is just one photo of like one stop, but elevation offers nice to wind. But if someone else here is more privy to the nature of the wind at Hilltop, we would be so grateful to hear.
I would say that I'm somewhat familiar with Hilltop, and I know that it is a park that's right at the base of Black Mountain in Rancho Penasquitos, and it faces west. So it would be in a prime location to be catching sea breezes. But that is something that, of course, all of these things will be kind of fleshed out and investigated, and make sure that the conditions are going to support what's being proposed. I would also add that, or I'll just reiterate that, you know, the location proposals right now are tentative, and they are subject to change after this presentation, but that's what we have in mind.
Okay. Anybody else? I think it's a beautiful idea, and it's so happy and lively. And as someone who loves aerial photography, I think this is a great idea. I remember pinhole cameras were introduced to us in high school by our photography teacher, and they seem like magical. And anyway, thank you for this presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie, and I know that Beck is tuning in remotely. So thank you both for the proposal and presentation, and thanks everybody for their comments. And so with that, we'll continue. So the next artist on the agenda is Brian Goldson. So I'm going to bring Brian into the meeting. Hello, Brian. So whenever you are ready. Oh, you appeared. Oh, okay. I think you may still be on mute, however.
All right. Sorry about that. After all these months, I've still got the trouble with the mute. It's nice to see you all. My name is Brian Gilson, and I am going to present to you a project that right now at least is tentatively titled The Olfactory Present by Means of Smoke. And it's based on what you might call artist orchestrated meals, which for those who aren't interested or familiar with ephemeral art of this sort, you might want, I just wanted to point out, maybe an incomplete history of the artists who've worked with food in different contexts, and some of the recent exhibitions over the last 5 or 10 years that have dealt with not food as a subject per se, but literally artist orchestrated meals as an event. So going back to the futurists, through Fluxus, performance art, conceptual art, down to our day with relational and socially engaged forms with artists such as Recreative Amnesia, David Robbins, Michael Rakowitz. Yeah, it's an interesting form that, again, like a lot of the work that I make and am interested in, is marginalized due to its, one, ephemerality, and two, its relationship to kind of privileging the non-visual senses. So with that said, one of the ideas that I wanted to focus on in creating a socially engaged work that dealt with food was actually the byproduct of food, which is smell, and what that might tell us about cultures, about their relationship to space and time. And just wanted to start by bringing up the etymology of the word perfume, that literally in its origin means through smoke or by means of smoke. And so when I talk about the olfactory present, I'm really trying to think about how does one define the contemporary, and how can the sense of smell help kind of triangulate that? So my goal all along, before I even developed the project, had to do with creating something that delivers people back into the present with a sharpened awareness and a sense of wonder. Awareness and wonder are two kind of focal points that my work usually travels around. And by means of a prelude to the project, I'm interested in the idea that smell, a meditative consideration of smell, can shake us awake to the differences in which other cultures experience the present. Literal and figurative migration brings together oftentimes a clash of olfactory rituals, many of them culinary in nature. We live in a period of post-colonial temporality where accelerated globalization connects disparate cultures, creating interconnections of temporalities. And you don't need to look anywhere or smell anywhere further than a local park. Because parks are egalitarian places, where groups can come together and share a meal, you often see or smell scentscapes emerging from these meals that reveal a lot about that culture, or that group's identity, about its relationship to space, time, about its relationship to foodways, which I'll introduce in a minute. So this project is a sensory-based, socially engaged artwork that attempts to raise an awareness and stimulate a dialogue around cultural difference by means of olfactory and gustatory traditions. So it's a 3-part project that I haven't decided on a park yet in District 7, but I'm kind of leaning toward a really nice open space in Linda Vista. The first part basically starts as a proposition, and it's right there, part 1. Teach me how to grill your favorite dishes and I'll pay for the entire cookout. So throughout District 7, I'll distribute flyers that advertise that proposition, and prospective candidates can apply online, filling out a simple form that queries the type of food they want to cook, their level of cooking knowledge, and other relevant questions. I'll choose 5 candidates whose cuisine represents a culinary cross-section of the cultural diversity found among the population living in District 7. Each candidate will offer me a cooking lesson on a different Saturday. All the lessons will be filmed and eventually edited into a short web series that functions as part cooking show, part foodways ethnography. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, foodways, it just basically refers to the cultural, social, economic practices related to the production and consumption of food. So that first part has a lot to do with developing the recipes, developing an understanding and sensitivity for practices. Part 2, I'll be making these interactive information boards that will be used in part 3. So let me just introduce those. Based on that preliminary data collection from part 1, I'll design interactive information boards around the topic of San Diego, or more specifically, I guess, District 7 foodways. These boards will be rich in historical, nutritional, geographic, and economic information. They'll have kind of a labyrinth-like quality, as users will get lost in the complexity of the ingredients and their impact on a culture's identity. Interspersed among the information boards will be stories that users will write about their experience with these foodstuffs. And then next to the information boards will be a display that will highlight what's often seen, as I mentioned earlier, as the byproduct of food culture, which is the smell. So these little displays will be olfactory in nature. They'll show ingredients at various stages of preparation, such as smoked, brined, fermented, etc. They'll be there available to smell, as participants will be encouraged to think about how these smells make up their understanding of the self or the other. And then these boards and displays will be prominently featured in the climax of the project, which is part 3, which is the orchestrated meal. So working with a chef, I'll design a meal that fuses or integrates many of the cultural or culinary traditions that we see and smell at park cookouts. So everything that I collected, all the data that I collected in part 1. The climax of the project will be this large scale artist orchestrated meal that features the interactive information boards and the smell displays. And that feast will be an opportunity for participants to think and talk about the present moment, the people and the communities that surround us, in the different ways that they approach something as universal as preparing and consuming food. So if you've noticed these small illustrations, we're starting with the park that's untouched currently right now in the Vista. Then the addition of, I only put 1 barbecue, but this will be really a pretty elaborate setup on the day of the event. And you see the information boards in the background. And then the day of the event, it'll be somewhat orchestrated or somewhat choreographed, but for the most part, it's something that is meant to generate wonder among participants, completely voluntary, what you smell, what you eat, and just be open-ended enough to stimulate wonder and try to bring some attention to that which is often overlooked, just because for reasons we don't have time to discuss, the sense of smell has been seriously marginalized since the Enlightenment. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank
So any questions from the Public Art Committee?
Let's see. Linda, did you have a question? Nope. Okay. Okay.
Linda, if you have a question, you're on mute, but otherwise we can.
I have that effect on a lot of people.
No. Okay.
I'm so sorry about that. I got disconnected there. My question for Brian was, first of all, I want to say that I really love this project, that it's such a beautiful manifestation of community. You have food and people obviously will gather and will be curious and will want to share so much. So I think that's really fantastic. I wanted to know about the documentation aspect of this. You did mention a cookbook at the end of it, but in the interim with the other activities happening, how will you capture that?
So the budget, as I've kind of hastily worked out at the moment, has money for both film and video. I've talked to a video production team in San Diego who are kind of willing to give me the artist discount to do a 5 or 6 part web series that basically, if you screen one after the other consecutively, it would add up to about 25 minutes of content. So the only thing that might put a crimp in that is if I really want to do the artist book and that becomes kind of cost prohibitive. I'm still trying to work out how I can have the video series and the artist cookbook as ways to kind of bookend the documentation of this project.
Okay. Let's see, Linda, did you have a comment? Melinda?
Yeah, I do. I echo Linda. I appreciate this project centered around food and also eliciting some of the trying to pull people together in a kind of a moment of rejoining publicly. I was wondering if, because you're doing it in District 7 and Linda Vista, is there part of the budget allocated to translation of any of these public materials, given the fact that it's such a high Latino community, Asian community, a very diverse Asian community. So yeah, just if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I wish I could. I honestly, I hadn't thought about it in those terms. So the part that would be, the part that would need to be translated would be the information board and the smell displays, which is small enough in terms of content that I would imagine it could happen. The other parts, you know, from the artist book to would be a transcription of the videos, since those aren't essential parts, I would have to kind of prioritize, but I would imagine that the boards themselves would need to be. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, anybody else?
Okay, well, if there's no other comments, thank you so much, Brian, for your presentation and for giving us some insight on that project, and thanks to everybody as well for their comments. I do recognize we're running short on time. However, I was anticipating presenting on behalf of one artist who couldn't be here today. So we do have one additional presentation. So I will get into that and be as quick as I possibly can be in conveying Timothy Murdoch's proposal. So if you'll give me one sec. All right. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm just doing a quick presentation on behalf of Timothy, who had conflicts and wasn't able to join us today. So I'm kind of going to quickly paraphrase what Tim is proposing. And the working title is Walking/Dancing the Wall. Where we might further refine that. But the artist has been contemplating the contemporary significance of walls and boundaries, and in the midst of COVID has been thinking about things that sort of are not constrained by those boundaries. So COVID being sort of a prime example of that. Something that the artist has kind of used as a material, and which is kind of a material proxy for these things that are not constrained by boundaries, is and especially kind of with a regional connotation, are these shipping pallets, which we've probably seen quite a bit in San Diego County, given the sort of trans-border economies, where with consumer goods crossing the borders, and then of course these pallets being repurposed south of the border, and there being sort of an economy in that in and of itself. So during the pandemic, the artist had been collecting these shipping pallets and creating them into essentially building blocks, or kind of generic building units. I hope this. I hope everybody can see this video. But yes, this was kind of one initial kind of iteration, which is kind of this video portrait of all of these varying blocks and boxes. Evolving from that, the artist was interested in initially kind of creating, using these building blocks to create some sort of structure. And the structure that he became interested in went back to the wall. And to give these blocks a kind of as so that they would sort of perform the same kind of mobility that the pallets that they came from did, in the sense that the pallets would move all over the world and not sort of be constrained by borders. So this was kind of a prototype of that project, called Walking the Wall. And incidentally, walking the wall is a military term which refers to kind of patrolling the wall, kind of protecting those within and observing those without the wall. And in this case, I'm using these kind of building block items as a way to deconstruct them from one end and construct them from another end, such that the wall moves and sort of undermines the wall's original intention. For the Park Social project, he's proposing a kind of two-part construction and deconstruction of it, being constructed, one by salsa dancers with in addition to so there would be kind of the dancers who are sort of performing the construction of the wall, and then performers as engineers who are kind of like directing the wall, or making sure that it was stable. In addition to live salsa performances adjacent to the happening, and so that this would be iterated through multiple parks. Currently, we're investigating the possibility of Fault Line Park in East Village downtown, Ward Canyon Park in Normal Heights, and potentially Balboa Park as well. Even though Timothy can't join us today, your comments he'll still have an opportunity to hear your comments because we will be sharing or will be the meetings being recorded and will be posted on the city's public meeting site. So anything you can offer will be useful to him as well. And so that is Timothy Murdoch's proposal. It looks like we had Larry.
Yeah, just want to say that I really like this piece. I think it's very historically relevant to where we are right now. We just finished 4 years of an administration that had an obsession with the symbolism of the wall for very, I think, unpleasant and politically inappropriate reasons. And so I think his piece of art, in a way, throws everything up in the air. It's a wonderful abstraction that kind of, asks people to really think about and celebrates the idea that the wall itself is this symbol that can have all sorts of meanings. And so I think he's really doing something very powerful. I really like it a lot. I think it's very engaging, and I think it will get people thinking about it. And maybe I would suggest that that he writes something that could travel with the exhibit if it's going to be put in different parks, that kind of gets the audience, just gives them a little flavor of what this thing is about. The way you explained it would be sufficient. Something like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Larry. I'll be sure that that Timothy gets that comment and can respond.
Oh, I did want to mention that I don't know if you know that San Diego is in the final running for being declared the world design capital. San Diego, Tijuana, actually. And I've been talking to people at the design lab at UCSD. They're the ones that are sponsoring this. So his exhibit, I don't know what the timing would be, but could actually play very well into this part of this whole exhibition and the work that's going to be done. And I think that would be over like a year or two. So he could certainly be part of that process. I see Christine shaking her head, so she's already on top of this, I'm sure. But I just want to mention that it would be really interesting to connect that with this other thing.
Yep, we are well aware of that here. So let's see. Okay, it looks like Doreen. And so you're muted, Doreen.
I wanted to tell you that I think you did a great job in commenting and producing this, information for I guess Timothy's behalf. It was really well done, and I'm very excited about this particular project for all the reasons that politically it's a very important statement to make, that the wall is is a symbol, but it's what we live in our heart, and it's to be deconstructed, and to make it into something that's beautiful and integrative. I just think it's a fabulous idea. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Doreen.
You're welcome.
So if are there any other comments? Okay, if not, I think it looks like we have lost Ben. So let's see, I think we might be able to quickly, if you can bear with us for a few more moments, we could go through the additional reports. We still do have quorum nonetheless. So
as far as staff reports go, Commissioner Meza did share with me he had to leave, so his apologies for that. So he did ask me to just go through the staff reports real quick for you all. So just as a reminder, first of all, it was really great to see a lot of your faces in person for SC Practice exhibition opening night. For those of you who weren't able to come that night, I hope you have a chance to go see both venues. So just as a reminder, the SD Practice exhibition's up at the San Diego Art Institute, as well as Bread and Salt. It'll be up at the Art Institute through September 5th. And we've extended the venue at Bread and Salt through San Diego Design Week. So we're excited about the extension because there'll be a lot of activities happening for Design Week at that location. So please go see the shows. And just as a reminder, in addition to the exhibition, in parallel with it, the city created a special feature, which is online. I'll drop in the link in just a minute. So if you haven't checked out the feature, it talks a little bit about the making of the initiative in terms of receiving the artist's work, and as well as the condition surveys. And then there's also a map feature that shows where the artworks are now and then where they're going to go after the exhibition and as they make their way into city public places. There also is an artist's profile with a Q&A for each artist. So remember, there's 89 artists. So it's a really great repository of a lot of artists working in San Diego today. And there's some really interesting Q&A, just kind of asking them more about their practice, working in San Diego as an artist. So we'll share that link and I encourage you all to check that out. And then I have a question for you all. So this is a question that I think Ron Salisbury, who just as a reminder is San Diego's Poet Laureate, his next workshop is actually being released today. So the questions he's posing to everyone are, why are poets always challenged with the inadequacy of language and words to express their deepest feelings in poems? Is it all right to tell a lie in a poem? What can dialogue do to help a poet? So he's posed these questions and he's hoping to address them in his workshop. Again, it launches today. He has a guest poet named Carla Cordero, who is a local poet, kind of an activist and educator. She teaches poetry at City College. And so we encourage you to check out the workshop and even submit a poem if you feel so inspired, as it will be visualized and mapped over time. And then last but not least, I kind of hinted at this, and so did Larry, a little bit about design. So this is an area that we want to celebrate here in San Diego. So for those of you who don't know, there is a new annual 5-day event. It was first launched last year during COVID. So it was all virtual last year. It's called San Diego Design Week. So that week is coming up September 8th through the 12th. So here's the website if you want to check it out. More information will be coming forth and more details about kind of the programming around it, probably launching a little bit in the next couple of weeks. And then just as part of our, continually wanting to engage, we're going to be doing an in-person public art tour. Will be an event as part of the programming. We're going to have some self-guided tours that people will be able to do online. And then the city will be hosting a creative economy conversation. So I encourage you to check it out. Again, all those details will be forthcoming in the next few weeks at that website. So that really concludes our updates for today. And since I think because Commissioner Meza is gone, I guess if there are any committee reports, this would be the time for those. And if not, then I guess, shall we adjourn?
Am I the boss now?
Yeah. Jason, you want to take over?
I'll chime in. No, I'd rather get it over with since we went so late. So I don't, but it's up to you. If there's something I need to say, I don't know what the committee report was, to be honest, but I'd rather let everyone go. If that's okay with you, Chuck, what do you think?
Oh yeah, I think we just need you to officially adjourn.
Okay, this meeting's adjourned. Have a good weekend, everyone. Great to see everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Great art
Bye.
project.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
This was
Thank
Bye.
you.
really terrific. Bye-bye.
All right. Stop recording.